Okay, so we're going to review how to use stencils. And so when you're using a stencil and you want to transfer it onto another surface, you can use tracing paper if you don't feel comfortable directly drawing on top of your watercolor paper. So what I would suggest that you do to kind of play on placement is either to do this directly on another sheet of paper or to do it on tracing paper, but always give yourself a guideline. So if I wanted to do 9 to 5, what I do is use these guidelines to make sure that my letters are straight and that they line up. And so then you can just trace your letter. Okay, and so I want to leave a little space for my dash for my 9 to 5. And I don't have a dash symbol on this set of stencils, so I'm going to have to make one. So I'm just trying to make that spacing kind of consistent with that. Okay. So then what I would want to do is get a piece of tracing paper. Remember, tracing paper is semi-transparent, like translucent, and you should be able to see through it. So you would put that on top of the surface, and then you would use maybe a soft pencil. So actually the first one, it doesn't really matter. You can use an HB pencil. Anything with a B is good for this exercise. And what you would do is you would trace the letter. And when you're using stencils, you know, you want to be pretty concise. And so this is one of the reasons why I said you actually could just trace directly onto it. I know some people like doing it on paper just to ensure consistency. But you can always go back to the stencil to kind of trace back over that line. Okay, and then you'd want to flip the image. So let me actually do this and finish this. So I'm going to finish this. So I'm going to trace this 1, 2, right, and make sure I'm on the line. Let me trace my 5 here. And maybe I want to move it over a little bit because it seemed like it was a little tight. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it upside down. And so it's going to be backwards. So on the tracing paper, let me actually kind of move this a little bit. On the tracing paper, I'm going to trace back over this line. So one of the things I could do is I could just flip the stencil over and trace it like this. I have to just make sure that it really is on top of the line. If you're slightly off, the transfer process isn't going to work very well. I'm going to actually kind of fix that. And then another thing you can do is just kind of sketch over the line and make it more fuzzy. So in case you do miss the line, you can hit it at some point. I just recommend that you be really careful if you do this method, right? So you're using a soft pencil. So if you rub it against the surface of the watercolor paper, it might kind of make a mess. So you want to make sure that you don't smudge it, okay? So you can see that it did leave some markings. So then when you get to your watercolor paper, this way you can move it around and see where you want to place it, right? So maybe I want to put it next to my no, right? And then you could trace it, or if you have your stencils and someone else isn't using them, you can always go in like this too and trace it so that you know exactly where you want it to be. So you could obviously just take the tracing in the stencil over and trace it directly onto this. But if you really want to make sure your placement is correct, you can do this simple transfer method to ensure that your letters are straight, that your spacing is good, like this dash should be more centered, right? And that you get it, like I said, exactly where you want it to be.